He whispered it to a stranger's ceiling at 3 in the morning, in a cabin she hadn't asked to be in, with a body that had finally refused to carry her any further. It hurts too much. Not the ankle, not the cold, not the storm. The other thing. The thing she had been moving away from for 4 months and couldn't outrun, because it wasn't behind her, it was inside her. The voice that said, "You bring trouble. You always have. You always will." The man who had carried her in from the fence line was still awake. She didn't know that yet. She didn't know he had heard. She didn't know what he was going to say when he answered. "Chatai." If that just stopped you, subscribe right now, hit the bell, and drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let's go back to Wyoming Territory 1881 and find out what happens when a woman who believes she deserves nothing meets a man who has decided the same thing about himself. Clara Whitmore had been moving west for 4 months, not toward anything. She had learned to be careful about the word toward, because toward implied a destination, and a destination implied hope, and hope had been, in her experience, the thing that cost you most when it didn't arrive. She had been moving away from New Hampshire, away from the town of Greer Hollow that she had grown up in and had believed was home, until a single night in October of 1879 had reorganized her understanding of what home meant and what people were capable of. She had been 23 then. She was 25 now, and she was crossing the Wyoming mountains in November on a horse that was not hers, and with supplies that were nearly finished, and a name she was not entirely certain was still worth having. The storm arrived without the warning she had learned to watch for. In New Hampshire, you read storms the way you read people. There were signs, signals, the specific quality of the sky, and the wind direction, and the way the animals moved that told you something was coming. She had grown up reading those signs. She was good at them. Wyoming storms did not read the same way. This one came from the northwest, and it came fast, the kind of fast that didn't allow for preparation, only for response. She was on a mountain pass, narrow, rocky, the kind of terrain that was manageable in good conditions, and became dangerous immediately when conditions changed, and the conditions changed in about 20 minutes. Rain first, then cold. Then the rain became something that was not quite rain and not quite snow, and was worse than either, because it made every surface immediately treacherous and took her visibility down to almost nothing. Her horse, a steady roan she had purchased in a small town in Colorado, with the last of the money she had carried out of New Hampshire, made the decision that horses made when terrain and conditions and instinct intersected in a particular way. The decision was not to continue. She could not entirely argue with the decision, but she also could not leave the horse, and she could not stay where she was, and for about 10 minutes she stood in the deteriorating weather on a mountain pass in Wyoming, and held the roan's bridle, and thought about her options, and came to the conclusion that her options were limited. She started leading the horse down. The horse went about 200 yards. Then the ground changed beneath her, a shelf of rock that had looked solid, and was not quite as solid as it looked, and her foot went through it and she fell, and the horse, startled, pulled back hard, and the bridle slipped out of her hands. She did not see which way the horse went. She was too busy trying to stop herself from sliding. She stopped herself. She sat up. She checked herself the way you checked yourself after a fall, systematically starting from the head moving down. Head was fine. Hands were cut. Right shoulder had hit something on the way down and was complaining significantly. Left ankle had gone sideways in the fall and was worse than the shoulder. She sat on the rock shelf in the Wyoming storm and looked at her hands and thought, this is the situation. She had been in worse situations than this. She had been in a situation where the man she thought was a decent neighbor had stood in the center of her family's community and told everyone she was the reason the Harper house had burned down. And she had stood there and watched people she had known all her life turn away from her, one by one, in the specific, slow, terrible way that people turned away from someone when the story told about them was more convenient than the truth. That situation had been worse. This was just cold and a bad ankle and a missing horse. She stood up. This was harder than she expected. The ankle was more compromised than she had assessed. She took a step, and the ankle sent her a message that was extremely clear about its current limitations. She took the message seriously. She did not stop moving. What she did was adjust. She found a branch that would work as a support. She redistributed her weight. She assessed the direction that looked most likely to lead somewhere that wasn't the mountain pass, and she moved in that direction. She moved for about an hour. She was not covering distance well. The ankle and the terrain and the weather were collaborating against her, and she was spending most of her energy on not falling rather than on moving forward. At some point she understood that she was not going to get as far as she needed to get before her body gave her the same message her ankle had already given her. She understood this, and she kept moving anyway. Because that was what she did. That was what she had always done. She had been moving since October of 1879. Not literally, but in the way that mattered. And the moving was the thing that had kept her from doing what the voice in the back of her head had occasionally suggested, which was stopping entirely and letting what happened happen. She had not listened to that voice. She was not going to listen to it today. She moved until her body stopped accepting instructions from her brain. The stopping was not dramatic. It was simply the specific moment where the message the body had been sending reached a volume that couldn't be overridden anymore. She was at the edge of something, a fence line. She registered dimly, the kind of fence that meant somebody's property, and she went down slowly. Which she was proud of, because going down slowly, rather than collapsing, was a form of control she retained. She sat against the fence post. She thought someone will come. She thought, or they won't. She thought, I have done what I could. And then she stopped thinking, which was the body's final message to her brain, delivered in the specific, emphatic way of a body that has run out of negotiating room. She was not unconscious. She was in the particular state between consciousness and unconsciousness, where thinking was still happening, but the thoughts were slow and disconnected, and she had lost the ability to act on any of them. She was in that state when she heard boots on the ground, not her imagination. Actual boots. The specific rhythm of a man walking at pace, someone who had seen something and was moving toward it. She tried to say something. What came out was not a word. The boots stopped. She felt a presence beside her, large, male, the specific warmth of another person in close proximity to someone who had been in the cold long enough to have forgotten what warmth felt like. Can you hear me? A voice, low, direct, not alarmed, the voice of someone who encountered situations that required calm response and had learned to provide it. Yes, she said, or tried to say. She wasn't sure how much of it came out audible. I'm going to pick you up, the voice said. Don't fight me. She thought about fighting. She thought, I don't have the resources to fight, and also this fence is cold. All right, she said. He picked her up. She had an impression of size and steadiness, someone who carried her like the weight was manageable, without any of the labored adjustment that would have told her it was an effort. She had the peripheral thought that he was strong in the way that people were strong when they worked physically, rather than deliberately strength as a byproduct of a life, rather than a goal of it. She let herself be carried. This was harder than it sounded. She had not let herself be carried by anyone in 2 years. She let herself be carried now because she did not have an alternative, and because the particular warmth of being held by someone who was warm was something her body was overriding her usual preferences about. She was carried to a cabin. She was put down on something soft, a bed, a cot, something horizontal that was not a wet rock, and she heard the specific sounds of a fire being built. Not rebuilt, but built from scratch, which told her the cabin had been cold. He had not been here when he found her. He had found her while he was coming back from somewhere. She stored that. She stored things. It was a habit she had developed in Greer Hollow when she was learning that the small details were the ones that told you whether a person was what they appeared to be. You stored the small details, and you reviewed them later, and you built a picture. The fire caught. The warmth began moving. She became aware of herself again in the specific gradual way of someone whose body was warming from the outside, in first the surface, then the depth, the specific unpleasant tingling of circulation returning. She opened her eyes. The cabin was small and functional. Not neglected, that was her first clear impression. The walls were solid, the surfaces were organized, the equipment was present and in good repair. Someone lived here who was paying attention to the living. The man who had carried her was at the fire. He was about 35. Maybe older. It was hard to tell with people who worked outside, because the outdoor life aged faces in ways that didn't always correspond to actual years. He was lean in the working way. Dark coat. His hands when he turned around and she saw them were the hands of someone who worked with them, not rough in the neglected way, but capable in the used way. He looked at her. He had the expression of a man who had found a half-conscious woman at his fence line and brought her inside, and was now taking stock of the situation without the specific alarm that would have told her he was uncertain what to do. He was not uncertain what to do. "How bad is the ankle?" he said, direct, practical. The question of someone who wanted useful information. "Bad enough," she said. "Can you bend it?" She tried. "Not without significant objection," she said. Something moved through his expression at that, not amusement exactly, but the slight adjustment of someone receiving an unexpected kind of answer. "Shoulder," he said. "Bruised. Not broken." "You assessed yourself," he said. "While I was sitting against your fence," she said. "Yes." He nodded. He went to a cabinet and retrieved things, bandaging something that was probably a remedy of some kind. Practical items managed with the efficiency of someone who had done this before. He came back to the cot. He looked at the ankle. "I'm going to need you to take the boot off," he said. She managed it, which was one of the more unpleasant 2 minutes she had spent recently. He examined the ankle with the specific, careful competence of someone who knew what he was looking for. "Not broken," he said, "but it's going to be a problem for a few days." "I need to leave in the morning," she said. He looked at her. He did not say that's not going to happen, which would have been both accurate and presumptuous. He said, "Where do you need to be?" It was a reasonable question. She did not have a reasonable answer. She had not had a reasonable answer to that question in 4 months. "I don't," she started. Stopped. He waited. "I don't have a specific destination," she said. Because lying to this man did not feel like the right start, and also because she was too tired to construct a lie that would hold up. He held the ankle carefully. "Then the morning is not urgent," he said. "I don't want to become someone's burden," she said. He looked up from the ankle. She had not intended to say that directly. It was the thing she had been not saying for 4 months, not wanting to ask for help, not wanting to stay anywhere long enough to require anything from anyone, not wanting to be the problem someone else had to solve. But she had said it to this man she had known for approximately 15 minutes. He looked at her steadily. "You think you're a burden?" he said. "I know I am," she said. He said nothing for a moment. He finished wrapping the ankle with the careful efficiency of someone doing a thing correctly. Then he sat back and looked at her. "I don't know what happened to you," he said. She held that. "But I know that someone who has been hurt doesn't become worthless," he said. He said it simply, without emphasis, in the tone of a person stating a fact that was obvious to them. Her eyes filled with tears. She had not cried in 4 months. She had been very specific about not crying, because crying required setting down some of the management she had been using to stay functional, and she could not afford to set it down. She did not set it down now, but the tears were there. "You don't understand," she said. "No," he said. "I don't." He stood up. "But I understand pain," he said. "And I know the difference between someone who is a burden and someone who is just carrying too much." He went to the fire. He put a pot on. She sat on the cot with the wrapped ankle and the tears she was not letting fall, and thought about a man who had found her at his fence line and had not asked who she was or what she was doing there or why she was alone in November in the Wyoming mountains. He had asked about the ankle. He had asked where she needed to be. He was making something that smelled like it was going to be warm. She held herself together. The room was quiet. "What's your name?" she said. He looked back from the fire. "Samuel Carter," he said. "This is my ranch." "Clara," she said. "Clara Whitmore." He nodded. He went back to the fire. She looked at her hands, which she had managed to get dry and which were still showing the cuts from the fall. She thought about the fence line, and the storm, and the horse that was probably somewhere that wasn't ideal, and the 4 months of moving away from things, and the fact that she was sitting in a warm cabin in Wyoming, being tended to by a man she did not know. She thought about the word burden, and about what she had said, and about the fact that he had not disagreed with her exactly, but had told her she was wrong in the specific, careful way of someone who was making a distinction rather than offering reassurance. She thought about the difference. Someone who has been hurt doesn't become worthless. Not, "You're not a burden." Not, "Don't worry about it." Not, "I'm happy to help." Someone who has been hurt doesn't become worthless. She held that. He brought her something warm. She drank it. He sat across from her. "There's a storm still going," he said. "Probably through the night." "I know," she said. "You can stay until it's done." "I'll be gone in the morning," she said. He held his cup. "If the ankle allows it," he said. "The ankle will allow it," she said. He held his cup. "We'll see," he said. Not a challenge, not a disagreement. The specific, even tone of someone who had decided not to argue about something that time would resolve. She held her cup. The fire was warm. The cabin was quiet. She was 25 years old, and she had been moving for 4 months, and she had not stopped anywhere long enough to feel warm in all of that time. She felt warm now. She was going to leave in the morning. That was the plan. The ankle had its own plan. She woke to find it had not improved in the night in the way she had told it to. She sat up and assessed it the way she had learned to assess things honestly, without wishful thinking, and the assessment was that putting full weight on it and walking on mountain terrain was not something the ankle was prepared to participate in today. She sat on the edge of the cot. She heard sounds from the other part of the cabin, the fire being stoked, the specific sounds of a person beginning their morning. Samuel appeared in the doorway. He looked at her. He looked at the ankle. He said nothing. "It's better," she said. He held his cup. "Try standing," he said. She stood. The ankle said what it said. She sat back down. "Tomorrow," she said. "Probably," he said. He brought her coffee. She had not had good coffee in weeks. The coffee she had been making on the trail had been functional at best, and this was something else, not elaborate but properly made from good beans, in the way of someone who had decided that coffee was worth doing right. She held the cup. "Thank you," she said. "For the coffee or the floor?" he said. She looked at him. He had not smiled, but there was something at the edges of his expression. "Both," she said. He nodded. He went back to whatever he had been doing. She held the coffee. She thought, "I will leave tomorrow." She thought, "He is not what I expected." She thought about what she had expected, which was the specific wariness she had developed about male kindness. The understanding that kindness was usually instrumental, that it usually had a cost, that the presentation of generosity was often the precursor to the expectation of something in return. She thought about Samuel Carter, who had carried her in from the cold and wrapped her ankle and made coffee and said someone who has been hurt doesn't become worthless, and who had in none of this said anything that suggested a return was expected. She stored it. She was still storing it when the door opened, and a man she had not met came in one of the ranch hands she gathered from the way he moved through the space familiar with it belonging to it. He stopped when he saw her. He looked at Samuel. Samuel said, "Miss Whitmore. Found her at the east fence line last night. Ankle's bad, she'll be here a day or two." The hand, a man of about 50 with a face that had been outside for most of those 50 years, looked at Clara. He said, "Ma'am." She said, "Thank you for not asking questions." He looked at Samuel again. Samuel said nothing. The hand said, "Cattle need the south fence checked," and went back out. Clara held her coffee. "Do they always do that?" she said. "Not ask questions." Samuel sat down across from her. "On this ranch," he said, "we've found that most people have their reasons for what they're doing, and most of those reasons are their own business." She held her cup. "That's a more enlightened policy than most places I've been," she said. "Most places you've been recently." he said. She held his gaze. Most places in general, she said. He held his cup. Where are you from originally? He said. The question was not intrusive. It had the tone of someone making conversation rather than investigating. New Hampshire, she said. He nodded. Long way from here, he said. Yes, she said. That was the point. He held his cup. He did not ask what the point was. She appreciated that more than she would have expected to. They sat with their coffee. The morning light was coming through the window. The storm had passed in the night and left the world the specific clean white of a new snowfall. She looked at it. She thought about 4 months of moving and the storm and the fence and his hands carrying her and the coffee and the specific quiet of this morning. She thought, I need to leave tomorrow. She thought, I do not know where I am going. She thought about the question he had not asked. She thought about the answer she did not have. The hand came back about an hour later, and there was a brief exchange about the south fence, and then he looked at Clara and said, You eaten. I not yet, she said. He looked at Samuel. Samuel stood up. He made food. He made it without asking what she wanted, which she would have found presumptuous in someone else and found efficient in him, because what he made was exactly the kind of food someone who needed to rebuild their resources needed. And she understood from this that he had thought about what she needed rather than about what was easiest to make. She ate. She ate seriously in the way she ate when she had not had a proper meal in a while, and he did not comment on it, and neither did the hand, and she was grateful for both silences. After she sat with the second cup of coffee. Samuel was at the table, with papers accounts. She understood from the nature of the papers the ongoing administrative reality of a working ranch. She looked at them from across the room. Your accounts, she said. He looked up. I keep accounts, she said, from my father's farm. I know what they look like. She paused. If you want an extra set of eyes while I'm here. He held the papers. You don't have to earn your stay, he said. I know, she said. I'm offering. He looked at her. He held the papers. He set them on the edge of the table where she could reach them. She reached them. She looked at the accounts. They were organized but not optimized, the specific state of records kept by someone who was proficient, but who did not have enough hours in the day to give them their full attention. She found 3 things in the first 20 minutes. She noted them. She handed them back. There, she said, pointing. He looked. He was quiet for a moment. How long did that take you? He said. 20 minutes, she said. He looked at the notes she had made. These are correct, he said. Not with surprise exactly. With the specific, careful attention of someone receiving information and verifying it. I know, she said. He looked at her. Something shifted in his expression. Not the something that people sometimes felt they were owed when they had done something helpful, the expectation of gratitude or admiration. Something more like recalibration. The expression of a man who had formed an initial picture and was revising it. Thank you, he said. You're welcome, she said. She put the coffee down. She looked out the window at the clean white of the new snow. She thought, I have been here for less than a day, and I have already made myself useful. She thought about what that meant. She thought about the word burden and about what he had said. Someone who has been hurt doesn't become worthless. She thought maybe. She thought the ankle will be better tomorrow. She was already not entirely sure she believed that. Not about the ankle, about the tomorrow, about the leaving. She held the coffee. Outside, the Wyoming winter was clean and cold and enormous. Inside, the fire was on, and Clara Whitmore, who had been moving away from things for 4 months, who had stopped allowing herself toward anything, because toward implied hope, and hope had costs, she wasn't sure she could afford anymore. Sat in Samuel Carter's cabin and felt something she had not felt in a very long time. Not safe. Not yet. But the specific small beginning of something that might eventually become safe if she let it, which was itself the thing she was not yet certain she was willing to do. She held the coffee. She looked at the snow. She thought maybe not tomorrow. She did not say it out loud, but she thought it. And the thinking was itself a kind of door, small, tentative, barely cracked, that she had not opened in 4 months. She left it where it was. She would decide tomorrow. She always decided tomorrow. But tonight the fire was warm and the coffee was good, and the ankle was the ankle. And somewhere a man was reviewing accounts with notes she had made in 20 minutes, and Clara Whitmore let herself be in the specific present moment of that without running the calculation of what it cost. Just for tonight. Just for this one night. Just for this one night. And then the night became a week, and the week became something she stopped trying to name, because naming it would have required deciding what it was, and deciding what it was would have required admitting that she had stopped making plans to leave. She had stopped making plans to leave on the 4th day, not consciously, not with a decision she could point to. It happened the way most true things happened in her experience, gradually, without announcement, in the accumulation of small things that were each individually manageable and were collectively something larger than any of them individually. The ankle was the stated reason. The ankle improved by the 3rd day in the specific way of things that had been given proper treatment and rest, not fully, not without protest, but significantly enough that leaving was no longer medically indefensible. She could walk. She could manage the terrain immediately around the cabin. She was not what she had been on the fence line. She could have left on day 4. She did not leave on day 4. What happened on day 4 was that she woke before Samuel, which she had done every day since the 1st, because her body had recalibrated its alarm system somewhere in the 2nd night, and had decided that waking before him was the appropriate thing, and came out to the kitchen and made the coffee. She had watched him make it for 3 days. She understood the method. She made it. He came out at his usual time, which was not quite sunrise, and stopped when he smelled it. He looked at the pot. He looked at her. She was at the table with the accounts she had been reviewing. She had asked for them on day 2, and he had given them to her without discussion, and she had been working through 3 months of records with the methodical attention she gave everything that involved numbers. "You made coffee," he said. "You make it every morning," she said. It seemed like the turn. He looked at the pot. He poured 2 cups. He sat across from her. He did not say thank you, which she found she appreciated more than she would have expected. Thank you would have made it something to acknowledge. This just made it something that had happened, which was more comfortable. They drank their coffee. She pointed to something in the accounts. He looked at it. "That doesn't match the September feed receipt," she said. "Are you sure the delivery was complete?" He frowned. "I was here when it came," he said, "but I wasn't counting. The count's off by about 12%, she said. "Either the delivery was short, or the record is wrong." He was quiet for a moment. "Harker's been supplying the feed for 2 years, he said. "I know," she said. "The previous records are clean." She held his gaze. "This one isn't." He looked at the accounts. "I'll check with him," he said. He checked. Harker, it turned out, had made a delivery error in September and had been charging for the full amount. The error, or the not accident, which was what Clara privately thought it was, after reviewing the previous records more carefully, amounted to several months of similar discrepancies she found later in the same afternoon. Samuel came back from Harker's with the specific expression of a man who has learned something he did not enjoy learning. He sat down at the table. "How much?" he said. She showed him the total she had compiled. He looked at the number. He was quiet for a long time. "How did you find this?" he said. "Pattern recognition," she said. "My father kept accounts. I learned to look for what didn't fit the pattern." She held the ledger. "The September entry didn't fit. Once I found that one, I looked at the others." He held the ledger. "I've been losing money to that man for months," he said. Not with anger exactly, with the flat tone of someone processing a correction to their understanding of their situation. "I know," she said. "And you found it in—" He stopped. "How long did this take you?" "This morning," she said. "After the coffee." He looked at the accounts. He looked at her. "Clara," he said. "Yes," she said. "That's—" He stopped, started again. "Thank you. I'm not finished," she said. "There's another supplier I want to look at." He held the ledger. "Look at it," he said. She looked at it. She found 2 more discrepancies by the end of the day. At supper, she had also started making supper on day 3, because it was a thing that needed doing, and she was the person present who could do it, and the logic of that seemed simple. The hand whose name was Walt looked at the food, and then at Samuel, and then at Clara. "You cook," Walt said. "My mother taught me," she said. "Good teacher," Walt said, and ate his supper. Samuel said nothing. But she saw his face when he ate the first bite, which was the expression of someone receiving something that was good enough to be noticed, and it was brief, and it was not made into anything, and she liked the brevity of it. On day 5, she went outside. The ankle was sound enough for careful movement on even terrain, and the ranch yard was even enough, and she had been inside long enough that staying inside felt like its own kind of problem. She walked to the fence line nearest the cabin. She stood and looked at the property. It was a working ranch, not the biggest she had seen, but substantial. Well kept in the way of something that was receiving consistent attention, rather than occasional intensive effort. The equipment was in repair. The fences were sound. The animals were healthy in the visible way that healthy animals were healthy. She thought about what it took to maintain this. She thought about Samuel who did it. She turned around, and he was behind her. Not surprising her, she heard him coming. She had developed in 2 years of moving through unfamiliar places the specific attention to her surroundings that came from understanding that not noticing things had costs. He stopped when he saw her turn. He did not apologize for being there. "Walt said you came out," he said. "I was inside for 4 days," she said. "Fair," he said. He came to stand beside her. They looked at the property. "It's a good ranch," she said. "It's a working ranch," he said. The distinction was not self-deprecating, just precise. "Those are the same thing," she said. He held his coat against the cold. "What did your father's farm look like?" he said. She had not talked about her family. She had not talked about New Hampshire, or Greer Hollow, or any of the before that had produced the after. She held the fence rail. "Green," she said finally. Everything was green. We were near water. The land was soft. She paused. "This is harder." "Wyoming is harder," he said, "than most places." "But it's beautiful," she said. He looked at her sideways. "You think so?" "I grew up somewhere soft and green and it didn't protect me," she said. "There's something honest about a place that tells you up front that it's going to be hard." He held his coat. He was quiet for a moment. "My wife felt the same way," he said. He said it carefully, the careful of someone who handles something fragile. She said Wyoming was honest. Clara held the fence rail. She did not ask about the wife. She had heard the past tense. She understood what the past tense meant, and she understood that he had offered the information voluntarily, which was its own kind of trust, and that the trust deserved the courtesy of not being pushed. "She sounds like she was perceptive," Clara said. "She was," Samuel said. They stood at the fence for a while. The wind was cold and the sky was the enormous winter sky of Wyoming, and neither of them said anything. It was the best conversation Clara had had in 4 months. The thing that had been building changed on day 7. It changed because of a letter. She got mail, sometimes had gotten it when she had addresses to give, which had been rare and increasingly rare as she moved west. She had not expected mail here. She had not told anyone she was here. But Samuel received mail, and on day 7, when Walt brought in the post, there was among Samuel's correspondence a letter in handwriting she recognized immediately in the specific cold way that you recognize things that had once hurt you. It was not addressed to her. It was addressed to the postmaster in Silver Ridge Valley, the nearest town, asking whether anyone had seen a woman matching a description that was clearly her. The letter was from Edward Blackwell. She knew the name. She knew it the way she knew the sound of the fire that had taken her family's house, not the house itself which had been her neighbor's house, but the reputation that had burned in Greer Hollow's community for 2 years afterward, fed by Edward Blackwell's specific version of events. She had not expected him to follow her. She had not thought she was worth following. She had apparently been wrong about that. She put the letter down. Samuel was watching her. "You know who that's from," he said. It was not a question. She had not thought her face had done anything specific. Apparently it had. "It's not your concern," she said. The specific reflex. The same thing she had been saying for 2 years whenever someone offered involvement. "I have a woman staying at my ranch," Samuel said. "Someone is looking for that woman. That makes it my concern at least enough to know what direction trouble might be coming from." She held the edge of the table. He was right. She hated that he was right. "His name is Edward Blackwell," she said. "He is a man from my hometown who found it convenient to blame a fire on me that was not my fault, and who built that story carefully enough that most of the people I had known my entire life believed it." She held the table. "I have been moving west because moving west put distance between me and his version of events." Samuel held the letter. "And now the distance is shrinking," he said. "He shouldn't have known where I was," she said. "I didn't tell anyone." "You stopped in Laramie," Samuel said. 2 weeks ago." "How do you know that?" "Walt passed through Laramie last month. He'd heard there was a woman matching your description moving through." He held the letter. "This letter is addressed to Silver Ridge. Someone connected the timing." She held the table. She thought about Laramie. About the boarding house where she had stayed 2 nights. About the woman who ran it, who had been friendly in the specific over-friendly way of someone who was going to make that friendliness useful later. "She sold the information," Clara said. "People need money," Samuel said. "The frontier is unforgiving about money." She held the table. "I have to leave," she said. "No," Samuel said. She looked at him. He set the letter down. "Leaving is what he's counting on," Samuel said. "If you leave, you are always going to be leaving. He sends a letter, you run. He follows, you run further." He held her gaze steadily. "At some point the running stops working." "It's worked for 2 years," she said. "It's bought you 2 years," he said. "That's not the same as working." She held the table. She thought about 2 years, about the specific exhaustion of 2 years of moving, about the 4 months of heading west, about the fence line and the storm and the ankle and the accounts and the coffee and the fence rail and the enormous Wyoming sky. She thought about leaving this. "He'll come here," she said. "Then he'll come here," Samuel said. "He'll say things about me," she said. "To people in Silver Ridge, he's good at saying things. He can say things," Samuel said. "I've lived in this valley for 8 years. People know who I am." "They don't know who I am," she said. "You've been here 7 days," he said. "Give it more than 7 days." She looked at him. "Why are you doing this?" she said, directly. The question she had been holding since the first morning. He held her gaze. "Because someone should have done it for you when you needed it most," he said. She held the table. She had heard this before he had said something like it in the first night, but it landed differently on day 7, with 7 days of evidence behind it. He was not saying it as a reassurance. He was saying it as a statement of what he intended. "You don't owe me anything," she said. "I know," he said. "I'm a stranger," she said. "You were," he said. 7 days ago." She held the table. "Samuel," she said. "Yes," he said. "If he comes," she started. "When he comes," he said. "When he comes," she said. "It will be complicated. He is not a man who fights directly. He fights through other people's opinions. He builds a version of you, and he maintains it, and he uses it." "I know men like that," Samuel said. "Not like him," she said. He held her gaze. "Tell me about the fire," he said. She held the table. She had not told anyone the full version. She had told partial versions in the specific way of someone who understood that people made judgments, and a partial version gave them less to judge with. But the partial versions had not protected her from anything. The partial versions had just been smaller windows into something larger. She told him the full version. It took a long time. He listened, the way he listened to everything completely without interruption, without the specific micro-expressions that told you someone was forming a judgment while you were still speaking. The Harper fire had started in October of 1879, in a house 3 properties from her family's farm. The Harpers had been her family's closest neighbors. She had grown up with their children. Their oldest son, James, had been a friend since childhood, and in the year before the fire had become something that was beginning to look like it might be more than friendship. Edward Blackwell had also been interested in Mary Harper James's younger sister. Edward was ambitious in the specific way of a man who believed the world owed him something and was always calculating how to collect. He had believed a connection to the Harper family would advance his position in Greer Hollow's community. Mary Harper had chosen James's friend over Edward's attention. The fire started in the Harper kitchen on a night when Clara had been visiting. She had gotten out. James and Mary and their parents had gotten out. The house had been destroyed. The cause was unclear, a lamp probably, or the stove, something ordinary that had become extraordinary. Edward Blackwell had been first on the scene. He had been first to suggest in the specific, indirect way that suggestions were made that Clara had been acting strangely in the days before the fire. That she had seemed upset about something. That she had access to the house, the kitchen specifically where the fire had started. None of this was accusation. It was just suggestion. Just the careful placement of questions in the minds of people who were already frightened and looking for something to explain the unexplainable. The questions became a story. The story became the truth for enough people that living in Greer Hollow became untenable. She had left in February. The fire had been in October. She had lasted 4 months. When she finished telling it, Samuel was quiet. He held his coffee. "James Harper," he said. "What did he say?" "James moved his family to Vermont after the fire," she said. "He wrote to me once. He said he didn't believe it." She held her hands. "But he also said he was sorry he couldn't stay." "He chose his family," Samuel said. "Yes," she said. "And your family," he said. She looked at the table. "My father died when I was 19, she said. "My mother died the year after. I was the last of the Whitmore family in Greer Hollow when the fire happened." She held her hands. There was no one to stay for. He held his coffee. "Blackwell knew that," he said. She looked at him. "He picked you specifically," Samuel said. It was not a question. He was working through the logic the same way she had worked through it in the 2 years since. "No family to defend you. A connection to the Harper household. Recent enough involvement with James Harper to make the story plausible." He held his coffee. "He's not a stupid man." "No," she said. "He's not." "He's a dangerous man," Samuel said. "Yes," she said. Samuel set his cup down. "Then we need to know what he knows and how much time we have," he said. "We." She held the word. She had not been a we in 2 years. She had been a me, a singular moving managing on her own me that had kept itself intact by not being attached to anything that could be used against it. She did not know what to do with we. "Samuel," she said. "Yes," he said. "I don't know why you keep saying we," she said. "I am not your, I don't have a claim on your protection." He held her gaze. "No," he said. "You don't have a claim on it. I'm offering it." He held her gaze steadily. "That's different." She held the table. "Why?" she said. He was quiet for a moment. "I told you about my wife," he said. "You mentioned her," she said. "Her name was Margaret," he said. "She and my son Thomas, he was 2. They died in the winter of 1876. Bad cold. I was out with the cattle when it turned severe. By the time I understood how sick they were..." He stopped. It was too fast. She held the table. "I blamed myself for 3 years," he said. "I still blame myself some days. The rest of the time I am working on what blaming yourself actually accomplishes." She held her hands. "And," she said, "it accomplishes nothing useful," he said. "It is a habit that keeps you in the past and prevents you from being useful in the present." He held her gaze. "Someone told me something once. A man who had been through worse than me and was further along in the working through it. He said you can carry grief or you can carry the person. You can't carry both." "What did he mean?" she said. "He meant that grief for people we've lost can either become the weight of what we lost, or it can become the understanding of what we know now because we loved them." He held her gaze. Margaret was kind. She helped people because it was right to help people. Not because it benefited her. Not because she wanted to be seen helping. Because it was what a decent person did. He held her gaze. "I can carry her as a loss, or I can carry what she understood." Clara held the table. She understood from this why he had carried her in from the fence line. Why he had made the coffee. Why he had said what he had said. Why he was sitting here now saying we. He was carrying Margaret as an understanding. She held the table. She did not cry. She came close. She did not. She was 25 years old, and she was sitting in a cabin in Wyoming with a man who had lost a wife and a son, and who was telling her why he kept doing kind things, and the reason was a woman named Margaret, who had understood something essential, and who he was trying to honor by continuing to act as she had acted. "She sounds like someone worth honoring," Clara said. "She was," Samuel said. They held their coffee. The fire was warm. The letter from Blackwell was on the table between them. She looked at it. "He'll come within a month," she said. "He's not someone who sends one letter and waits." "I know," Samuel said. "And when he comes," she started. "When he comes," Samuel said, "we will handle it." She looked at him. "You don't know what handling it looks like," she said. "Not yet," he said. "But I know what I know about this valley and the people in it. And I know what you've told me about Blackwell." He held her gaze. "And I know that a man who fights through other people's opinions needs to find people willing to hold those opinions for him." She held the table. "And if the people in Silver Ridge decide his version is more credible than mine," she said. He held her gaze. "Then we give them better information," he said. She looked at him. "You make it sound simple," she said. "It's not simple," he said, "but it's possible, and possible is enough to work with." She held the table. She thought about possible. She had spent 2 years operating on what was survivable rather than what was possible. The distinction between the two was larger than she had realized. Survivable was a floor. Possible was a ceiling. She had been living at the floor. "All right," she said. He looked at her. "All right," he said. "I'll stay," she said. "Not because I don't have somewhere to go." "I know," he said. "Because—" She stopped. Found the right words. "Because running is not the same as solving, and I've been running for 2 years, and I'd like to try something different." He held his coffee. "Good," he said. She held her coffee. She thought we. She thought, "I do not know what this is or what it becomes." She thought, "I know it is real, which is more than I have had in 2 years." She thought about the fence line, and the storm, and the ankle, and the coffee, and the accounts, and the letter, and Margaret, who had understood something essential. She thought about staying. She let herself stay. Walt came in from the afternoon rounds and looked at both of them, and looked at the letter on the table and said, "Trouble coming." "Eventually," Samuel said. Walt sat down. He looked at Clara. "You know how to ride," he said. "Yes," she said. "Shoot," he said. "Yes," she said. He looked at Samuel. "She'll be useful then," he said. He went to wash up for supper. Clara looked at Samuel. Samuel looked at her. "Walt has a gift for the essential question," she said. "Always has," Samuel said. She almost smiled. She thought, "This is the beginning of something." She thought, "I do not know where it goes." She thought the not knowing is something I am going to have to learn to hold without running from it. She held her coffee. She held the not knowing. She did not run. That was enough for today. That was exactly enough, and then enough kept becoming more, the way it had been becoming more since the night she stopped making plans to leave in the specific, gradual way of things that were real rather than arranged. The weeks between Blackwell's letter and Blackwell's arrival were the most significant weeks of Clara Whitmore's life since the fire. Not because anything dramatic happened in them, because nothing dramatic happened, and she was there for all of it, and being there for the ordinary was the thing she had been missing without knowing she was missing it. She learned the ranch. Not as a visitor learns a place from the outside with the tourist's awareness of surfaces and general impressions. She learned it the way a person learned something they were invested in, specifically functionally, with attention to the things that mattered, and curiosity about the things that would matter later. She understood the cattle operation within 2 weeks from the perspective of someone who had grown up on a farm and therefore came with vocabulary and instinct even if the specifics were different. She understood the feed situation and the water situation and the specific vulnerabilities of the herd in winter, which were the vulnerabilities she cataloged in the accounts alongside the ones she had already found. She understood Walt within 3 days. Walt was a man who communicated in the absolute minimum number of words required to convey necessary information, and who had decided at some point in his life that this was the appropriate way to operate, and who had not reconsidered that position. She found she liked this about him. She had spent 2 years in the presence of too many words that said too little, and too few words that said anything true, and Walt's economy was restful. She understood Samuel more slowly. Not because he was difficult to understand. He was in many ways the most straightforwardly comprehensible person she had encountered in 2 years. What he said was what he meant. What he did reflected what he valued. There was no gap between the presented version and the actual version. She understood him slowly because she was being careful. She had not been careful enough in the past about the difference between a person presenting well and a person actually being well. She had been wrong before. She was not going to rush to certainty about something that mattered. She watched. She noted things. He was with the animals, the way she had heard some people were with animals, not performatively, not in the way of someone who had decided that being kind to animals was a character trait to cultivate. He was simply attentive. He knew when one of the horses was off in a way that wasn't obvious yet. He knew when a calf was having trouble before the calf made it obvious. He had the specific awareness of someone who had been paying attention to the same things for long enough that the attention had become automatic. She had known people like that with children. She had never known a man like that with animals. She noted it. She noted the way he handled the other ranch hands, not just Walt. There were 2 others who came several days a week for the heavier work. He did not direct them from a distance. He worked beside them, which she had seen with Samuel from the beginning. But she noticed now the specifics of how he did it. He explained what he needed in terms of why, rather than just what. He took the worst end of hard jobs without making it a point. He noticed when someone was struggling before they said so. She noted all of it. She built a picture. On the 18th day, the picture was complete enough that she said to him at supper, "You should know something." He looked up. "I have been watching you," she said. He held his fork. "For 18 days, she said. "Carefully. The way I watch things when I'm trying to understand whether they're what they appear to be." He held his fork. He did not ask what she'd concluded. He waited. "You're what you appear to be," she said. He held his fork. "Is that—" he started. "It's rare," she said. "In my experience, it's very rare." He held his fork. He said nothing. She picked up her food. He picked up his. They ate supper. It was, she thought, the most important conversation she had not had, because what she had said in those 4 sentences was more than the words. It was the declaration that she had looked carefully and found what she found and trusted what she found, which was itself a form of trust, which was something she had not extended to anyone in 2 years. He knew that. She could see from his face that he knew it. He did not make it into anything larger than it was. He ate his supper. She ate hers. On the 23rd day, she was sitting outside in the late afternoon. She had discovered that the late afternoon, when the work had been done and the evening hadn't started yet, was the time of day she liked best on this ranch when Samuel came and sat beside her. "You always sit here at this time," he said. "Old habit," she said. "From Greer Hollow. My mother used to sit on the porch at this time of day. She said it was the hour when you could feel the day deciding what it was going to become." He held that. "That's a good way to put it," he said. They sat. The Wyoming evening was doing what Wyoming evenings did, turning the enormous sky colors that she had not seen in New Hampshire, the specific particular palette of a sky that had more room to be itself. "Tell me about Margaret," she said. He was quiet for a moment. "What do you want to know?" he said. "Anything you want to tell me," she said. "She's been in this conversation since the letter. I want to know who she was." He held his hands. He told her. Margaret Carter had been from Ohio. She had come west with her family at 17 and had met Samuel at a land auction when he was 22 and she was 19. She had decided he was worth knowing, which he had been informed of directly, which he said was the thing that had first made him understand she was different from anyone he had met before. She was direct. She said what she meant. She found the frontier honest in the way she found most hard things honest, because they told you up front what they were asking for, rather than asking for it quietly until the asking had taken everything. She had made the ranch what it was in the years before she died. Not the physical structure that was Samuel's work, but the living in it. The fact that it had felt like somewhere rather than just something. "That's what's been missing," Clara said. "Since she died." He held his hands. "Yes," he said. "The ranch is well kept," she said. "But it doesn't feel like somewhere. It feels like something being maintained." He looked at her. "Yes," he said. "That's exactly right." "Walt said something," she said. "On the third day. He said the ranch hadn't been the same since Mrs. Carter." "Walt says things sometimes," Samuel said. "He said it to himself," she said. "He didn't know I heard." Samuel held his hands. "He's right," he said. Clara looked at the sky. "I'm not going to be Margaret," she said. "I know," he said. "I don't want you to." She stopped, started again. "I don't want you to be thinking that I am a replacement for something you lost. I can't be that. It wouldn't be fair to either of us." He held his hands. "Clara," he said. "Yes," she said. "I know the difference between a person I loved and a person I'm beginning to know," he said. He said it simply the way he said everything that mattered. "You are not a replacement for Margaret. You are yourself. And what I feel about you being here is about you, not about her." She held her hands. "You feel something about me being here," she said. Careful, not leading, asking. He held her gaze. "Yes," he said. She held her hands. "I'm not ready to name it," she said. "I want to be honest about that." "All right," he said. "Not because it isn't, not because I don't." She stopped. "I need more time." "I know," he said. "I've been wrong before," she said. "About what things were and what they would become. I was wrong about my safety in Greer Hollow. I was wrong about the people I thought would stand with me." She held her hands. "I'm not willing to be wrong about something important again without being very sure first." He held her gaze. "Take the time you need," he said. "It might be a long time," she said. "That's all right," he said. She held her hands. She looked at the sky. "Samuel," she said. "Yes," he said. "Thank you," she said. "For the time, for the patience, for the specific understanding that what she needed was what she needed, and that it wasn't his to hurry." "You already thanked me for the floor," he said. "That was day one," she said. "This is different." He almost smiled. Not quite. But the edges. She had been cataloging his edges. They sat until the sky was fully dark. Then they went inside. Blackwell arrived on a Tuesday. She knew before she saw him that he was coming. Walt came in from the morning rounds with the expression he wore when he had something to report that was not operational and said, Man came into Silver Ridge yesterday asking about the Carter Ranch, asking about whether there was a woman here. Clara held her coffee. What did people say? She said. I wasn't there, Walt said. Heard it from Hanson at the feed store this morning. He looked at Samuel. Hanson said the man had an Eastern accent and city clothes, and the kind of smile that made him want to count his fingers after they shook hands. Samuel looked at Clara. She set her coffee down. That's him, she said. How long? Samuel said to Walt. He was at the hotel last night, Walt said. Probably today. Samuel looked at Clara. You don't have to see him, he said. No, she said. I do. He held her gaze. Clara. If I don't see him, he controls the story, she said. He comes to the ranch, he asks about me, and whatever I am to the people in Silver Ridge is whatever he tells them while I'm hiding inside. She held his gaze. I spent 2 years in Greer Hollow trying not to be visible enough to be attacked. It didn't work. He held her gaze. He understood what she was saying. All right, he said. But I'll be there. I know, she said. He nodded. They waited. Blackwell came at 2 in the afternoon. She saw him from the window first, a man on a horse coming up the ranch road with the specific posture of someone who had decided on their approach before they arrived and was managing it. He was well dressed for the frontier, which was itself a statement. He was 40 maybe or close to it, with the kind of face that had been pleasant enough when young and had become sharper with the accumulation of calculation. She stepped away from the window. She went to stand near the fire, not because she was cold, but because standing near the fire felt like the right position. She would not be visible from the door immediately, but she would be visible when he was inside, which meant she chose when he saw her. Samuel went to the door. She heard them, Blackwell's voice outside, the specific warmth of it, the practiced friendliness of a man who had learned to make his approach seem like courtesy. Carter, I'm Edward Blackwell from New Hampshire, originally came west on some business. I heard you might have a woman staying with you. Come in, Samuel said. Blackwell came in. He saw Samuel first, then Walt, then the room, and then his gaze moved and found her. She watched it happen. She watched the specific adjustment that crossed his face, the calculation fast, the recalibration of a man who had expected one situation and found another. He had expected, she thought, to find her uncertain or frightened or alone in a way that would give him leverage. He had found her standing near a fire in a warm cabin with 2 men who clearly knew she was there and had not been surprised by her presence. The calculation adjusted. The smile arrived. Clara, he said. Warm, gentle, the specific warmth of a man performing concern. I've been looking for you. Everyone in Greer Hollow has been worried. No, they haven't, she said. The warmth flickered. Just barely. Clara, he said again, reproachful now. I understand you must have been through a difficult... Why are you here, Edward? She said, directly, not a question. He looked at Samuel. Samuel was looking at Blackwell with the specific flat expression of a man who had formed an assessment and was not revising it. Blackwell looked at Walt. Walt was looking at the middle distance, which was Walt's version of paying extremely close attention. Blackwell looked back at Clara. The warmth was still there, but it was working harder now. I wanted to make sure you were all right, he said. After what happened. After what you did, she said. He held her gaze. Something moved through his expression. She had seen it before. The specific internal reorganization of a man who has walked into a room expecting to control it and has understood that control is not what he has. I don't know what you think I did, he said, but I can tell you that people in Greer Hollow believed what you told them, she said, which you made sure of, carefully, over months. She held his gaze. You are very good at the telling, Edward. I'll give you that. He held her gaze. The warmth was entirely gone now. What was behind it was what she had always known was there, not anger, not passion, not even particular cruelty, just calculation, The cold, patient calculation of a man who saw other people's lives as territory to be managed. "You have no proof of anything," he said. "I don't need proof," she said. "I know what happened. So do you." He held her gaze. "The people in Silver Ridge Valley," he said, and his voice had changed again. Smooth now, deliberate, the voice he used when he was about to do the thing he was actually good at. "Might be interested to know about the woman who is staying with an unmarried rancher without any explanation of who she is or where she came from." Blackwell finished and let the sentence sit in the room like something placed carefully on a surface, waiting to see who would pick it up. Nobody picked it up. Samuel looked at Blackwell with the flat assessing gaze of a man who has encountered a particular kind of problem before and has an accurate sense of its dimensions. Walt looked at the middle distance, which was Walt's version of paying complete attention. Clara held her position near the fire and held Blackwell's gaze with the specific steadiness of a woman who had just made a decision that she understood was final. The moving was over. This was the stand. She was making it here. "The people of Silver Ridge Valley," Samuel said, "know who lives on this ranch, and they know what my name on an account means." He said it without heat. "If you have something to say to them, you're welcome to say it. But before you do understand something." Blackwell looked at him. "I have been in this valley for 8 years, Samuel said. "I have worked beside these people and done business with these people and been honest with these people when honesty was inconvenient, as well as when it wasn't." He held Blackwell's gaze. "My word in this valley is known. Yours isn't." Blackwell's expression did not change, but his eyes did. The calculation was running. Clara had seen it run before. She knew what it looked like from the outside, the specific quality of attention in a man who was revising his approach in real time, assessing what he had to work with, and what he didn't, and where the leverage was. He was finding she thought that the leverage was not where he had expected it to be. He looked at her. "Clara," he said. Softer now. The warmth again, but different. Not the performed warmth of his arrival, something that was trying to be genuine and couldn't quite manage it. "I came here because I was concerned. What happened in Greer Hollow was terrible. For everyone. And I know you've been carrying the weight of how people talked about it." "How you made them talk about it," she said. He held her gaze. "I never said anything untrue," he said. She looked at him. "No," she said. "You never said anything untrue. You said things that were true adjacent to things that were false, and you arranged them in an order that produced a conclusion you wanted people to reach. That's more sophisticated than lying." She held his gaze. "And more damaging." Blackwell held his hat. Something had shifted in him. Not retreat. He was not a man who retreated cleanly. Something more like realignment. The specific adjustment of a man who has understood that the direct approach is not going to work here and is beginning to calculate the indirect one. She knew the indirect one. She had been subject to it for 2 years. "I think," Blackwell said, "that we've gotten off on the wrong foot. I'd like you to leave," Clara said. He looked at her. "I'm not done. You came here to find out what I know and who I've told it to," she said, "and to establish a version of events in this valley before I could." She held his gaze. "You've been here 20 minutes. If the version you intended to establish in Silver Ridge was going to hold you, should have arrived before I did." She held his gaze. "I've been here 5 weeks." Blackwell was very still. The calculation had reached a conclusion. He looked at Samuel, then at Walt, then back at Clara. "This isn't over," he said quietly without performance, which was the most honest he had been since he walked through the door. "I know," she said. He left. The door closed. The cabin was quiet. Walt at the end of the room picked up his coffee. "That's the man," he said. "Yes," Clara said. Walt drank his coffee. "He'll go to Silver Ridge," Walt said. "Yes," Samuel said. "Tonight," Clara said. "He'll want to get there before we do." Samuel and Walt looked at her. "We need to be in Silver Ridge tomorrow morning," she said, "before the story has time to settle." Samuel held her gaze. "You want to tell it first?" he said. "I want to tell it accurately," she said, "before his version becomes the default." She looked at both of them. "I've watched his approach for 2 years. He doesn't plant a story all at once. He plants questions, small ones, specific ones, questions that make," she said, "before his version becomes the default." She looked at both of them. "I've watched his approach for 2 years. He doesn't plant a story all at once. He plants questions, small ones, specific ones, questions that make people uncertain, and then he comes back later with the answers." She held their gaze. "If we get there tomorrow morning, the questions are too new to have taken root." Samuel held her gaze. "All right," he said. "We go in the morning." Walt nodded once. Definitive. The way Walt agreed to things. That evening at supper, nobody talked about Blackwell. Not because they were avoiding it, but because there was nothing more to plan tonight, and planning what didn't need planning was something none of the three of them were inclined to do. Clara made supper. She had been making supper for 5 weeks, and she had in those 5 weeks developed a sense for what the two people she was cooking for needed that was different from what she would have made for herself. Samuel ate more when he had been working in the cold. Walt ate less when he was worried about something which was easy to read because he talked less than usual. Walt tonight was talking less than usual. She made what she made for the cold working nights. After supper, when Walt had gone to the bunkhouse, Samuel stayed at the table. She stayed too. The fire was banked for the night. The lamp was lit. He held his cup. "Clara," he said. "Yes," she said. "What you said to him," he said. "In the cabin, the way you said it." He held his cup. "You've been thinking about that for a long time." 2 years, she said. He held his cup. "How does it feel, saying it to his face?" She thought about it honestly. "Like putting something down," she said. "But not the way I expected. I thought it would feel like winning something. It felt more like stopping something." She held her cup. "Like the difference between a fight ending and a fight being won." He held his cup. "Is it over?" he said. "No," she said. "Tonight was the opening. He's at Silver Ridge right now. Tomorrow is the actual thing." He held his cup. "Are you afraid?" he said. She thought about that too. "I was afraid in Greer Hollow," she said. "The whole time. I was afraid every day that someone would say something in front of someone else, and the story would change again, and there would be nothing I could do about it." She held her cup. "I'm not afraid right now. I think I'm resolved. Those are different things." He held her gaze. "Resolved," he said. Like he was testing the words fit. "Like the ankle," she said. "On day 1, the ankle was a problem I was managing. On day 7, it was a problem I had understood the shape of and was navigating around. By day 14, it wasn't a problem anymore. It was just information about what I could and couldn't do." She held her cup. "Blackwell feels like that now. 2 years ago, he was a disaster. Then he was a threat. Now he's just information about what a certain kind of man does when he wants to control something." Samuel held his cup. "You've been carrying him for 2 years, he said. "Yes," she said. "How does not carrying him feel?" he said. She held her cup. She thought about the fence line and the storm and the day she had decided to stay. She thought about the accounts and the coffee and the supper and the fence rail and the sky. She thought about 5 weeks of learning what real meant from the inside in the specific, direct, honest way of someone who showed you what they were rather than telling you. "Like this," she said. "The way this feels. Tonight. Here." He held her gaze. Neither of them said what this was. They didn't need to yet. They drank their coffee. They went to bed. Silver Ridge the next morning was a town with something in it that hadn't been there the day before. Clara felt it from the moment they rode in the specific quality of a community that has had information deposited in it and is in the early stages of figuring out what to do with the information. Not hostile, not warm. The specific, careful attention of people who were watching to see what the next thing would tell them. Blackwell had been busy. She had expected that. She and Samuel and Walt rode to Hanson's feed store first, which was where information was made official in Silver Ridge, not by Hansen specifically, but by the particular combination of Hansen's feed store and the three families who came through it most mornings and who were between them connected to most of the valley. Hansen looked at them when they came in. His expression confirmed what she had sensed. "Heard there was a man looking for someone at the Carter Ranch," Hansen said. "He found her," Samuel said. He looked at Clara. Clara held Hansen's gaze. "My name is Clara Whitmore," she said. "I'm from Greer Hollow, New Hampshire. I came west in February. I've been at Samuel's ranch for 5 weeks." She held his gaze directly. "The man who came looking for me is named Edward Blackwell. He is from Greer Hollow. He has a version of events about why I left that involves a fire and my involvement with it." She held his gaze. "I want to tell you the true version." Hansen held his counter. He was 60 or close to it, with the face of someone who had been running a business that required accurate assessment of people for a long time. "I'm listening," he said. She told him. The full version the way she had told Samuel on day 7. Not the short version, not the protected version. The complete account of what had happened in Greer Hollow, and what Edward Blackwell had done with it, and why, and what 2 years of carrying that story had looked like. 2 other people came in while she was talking. She kept talking. By the time she finished, there were 4 people in Hansen's store, including Hansen, and all 4 of them had heard the whole of it. Hansen held his counter. He was quiet for a long moment. "Blackwell was here last night," he said. "I know," she said. "He said you had a history of causing trouble," Hansen said. "I know what he said," she said. "Said the fire wasn't your fault specifically, but that you'd been involved with the Harper family and there had been questions about it." Hansen looked at her steadily. "That's a careful way of saying something." "He's a careful man," she said. Hansen held his counter. He looked at Samuel. Samuel looked back at him with the specific flat expression of a man who was not arguing his case because he believed the case should argue itself. "She's been at your ranch 5 weeks, Hansen said. "Yes," Samuel said. "And you believe what she's telling us," Hansen said. "I believe her," Samuel said. Hansen looked at the 4 people in his store. He looked at Clara. "The thing about Blackwell," Hansen said slowly, "is that he was very smooth. Very careful, like you said. He didn't say anything you could point to." "No," Clara said. "He never does." "But he left a feeling," Hansen said. "The specific feeling of something not being told to you." "Yes," Clara said. "That's his method. He plants the feeling and then comes back with the explanation for the feeling." Hansen held his counter. "And you're here telling the explanation yourself," he said. "Yes," she said. He looked at the people around him. He looked at Samuel. He looked at Clara. "All right," he said. "Tell it again. There's a woman named Ruth Mabry who will be here in about 20 minutes, and she talks to everyone in this valley. I want her to hear it directly from you." Clara told it again. Ruth Mabry arrived in 19 minutes. She was 55 and had the expression of a woman who had heard everything in her 55 years and retained the ability to be surprised, which Clara found reassuring. She listened to the whole account without interrupting. When Clara finished, Ruth looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, "He came to my door last night." Clara held still. "He did," Samuel said. "He did," Ruth said. "Said he was an old friend of the family from New Hampshire, and he was worried about a young woman who had been through some trouble." She held Clara's gaze. "He was very concerned." "He's always very concerned," Clara said. Ruth held her gaze. "What you've just told me," Ruth said, "and what he told me last night are the same events described in 2 very different ways." "Yes," Clara said. "His version had you at the center of a complicated situation," Ruth said. "Yours has him." "Yes," Clara said. Ruth was quiet for a moment. She looked at Samuel. "Carter," she said. "You've known this woman 5 weeks." "Yes," Samuel said. "And you'd stand here and tell me her version is the true one," Ruth said. I'd tell you to look at both versions and decide which one has the kind of detail that comes from the thing actually happening, and which one has the kind of detail that comes from someone constructing a story, Samuel said. And then decide. Ruth looked at Clara. The Harper family, she said. Do they still exist? James Harper is in Vermont, Clara said. He wrote to me once after I left. He said he didn't believe what Blackwell was saying. But he didn't stay, Ruth said. He had his family to protect, Clara said. I understand it. Ruth held her gaze. Could he be reached? Ruth said. James Harper. Clara had not thought about this. She thought about it now. Possibly, she said. I have the address he wrote from. Ruth looked at Hanson. Hanson looked at Ruth. Some communication passed between them in the fluent language of people who had known each other for 20 years and had developed their own shorthand. Write to him, Ruth said to Clara. Today. Clara held her gaze. Why? She said. Because Blackwell is still in Silver Ridge, Ruth said. He's staying at the hotel. He hasn't left, which means he's waiting to see what happens next. She held Clara's gaze. A letter from James Harper, even if it takes weeks to arrive, changes the ground under him. He knows it, and we know it. She paused. And in the meantime, I have some things to say to some people in this valley. Clara held the counter's edge. She had not expected this. She had expected to tell the story and wait for people to decide what to do with it. She had not expected Ruth Mabry to immediately organize a response. Thank you, Clara said. Ruth looked at her. You told it straight, Ruth said. That matters. People around here can tell the difference between straight and managed. She left. The store was quiet for a moment. Then one of the other people who had been listening, a man Clara didn't know, middle-aged with the particular look of someone who had been thinking while listening and had arrived at a conclusion, said, I was in the hotel bar last night. Blackwell was there. Samuel looked at him. What did he say? Samuel said. He was talking to Reeve, the man said. Reeve has the hardware store. He was saying the Carter Ranch might be having some financial difficulties, and that there might be business opportunities for people in the valley who wanted to get ahead of the situation. He held Samuel's gaze. He was going to buy your feed contract. He'd already talked to Harker. The room was quiet. Clara looked at Samuel. Samuel held the counter's edge. His expression was controlled, but she knew his face now. She had been watching it for 5 weeks. And underneath the controlled expression was something that was the specific anger of a man who has just understood that the attack was never limited to one front. Blackwell had not come just to discredit Clara. He had come to take advantage of the situation he was creating, discredit the woman at the Carter Ranch, create questions about the ranch's reputation and stability, and then position himself to absorb the business opportunities that vulnerability created. He's not just here because of me, Clara said. No, Samuel said. He's here because I gave him a problem he can monetize. He looked at Clara. You. Here. A woman with a complicated past from his hometown staying at my ranch. If he manages the story correctly, it's damaging enough to weaken my position with suppliers and business partners. He held her gaze. He's been planning this since he found out where you were. She held the counter's edge. She felt something move through her. Not guilt, she recognized that trap and stepped around it. But the specific cold anger of someone understanding that they have been used as an instrument by a man who was not even primarily interested in her. She had been a tool. She was a liability he could weaponize. What's Reeve likely to do? She said to the man who had been in the bar. Reeve's cautious, the man said. He won't move fast. But if Blackwell gives him a week to think about it, then we have a week, Samuel said. Fewer than that, Clara said. If Ruth Mabry talks to people today, some of them will talk to Reeve. He'll hear 2 versions, and the second version is always less powerful than the first. She looked at Samuel. You need to go see Reeve. Today, before the end of business. Samuel looked at her. He had the expression of a man reassessing something. You've been thinking about his strategy, he said. I've had 2 years to think about his strategy, she said. He's consistent. He finds a vulnerability, and he works it from multiple angles simultaneously, so that wherever you look, there's a new fire to put out. She held his gaze. The way to beat a multi-angle attack is to address more angles faster than he can. Samuel held her gaze. Hanson, Samuel said. Go, Hanson said. I'll handle things here. Samuel looked at Walt. Walt had not said a word since they walked in. He said now, I'll go to the livery. Blackwell has a horse. I want to know how much feed he bought. Samuel looked at him. If he bought more than 1 day's worth, Walt said, he's planning to stay. He left. Samuel looked at Clara. You're going to stay with Hanson, he said. No, she said. I'm going to write to James Harper, and then I'm going to go find Edward Blackwell. Samuel held her gaze. Clara, he's been working at a distance from me for 2 years, she said. Everything he does through other people, through their opinions and their assumptions and their willingness to believe the most convenient version of things. She held Samuel's gaze. I want to talk to him directly, without a room full of people. I want him to know that I know the full shape of what he did and what he's doing here. Why? Samuel said. Because men like Blackwell operate in the space between what they know and what other people know, she said. He knows what he did. I know what he did. As long as everyone else is working off incomplete information, he has room to maneuver. She held his gaze. I want to close the room. Samuel held her gaze for a long moment. You're not going alone, he said. No, she said. I know. He held her gaze. All right, he said. He went to see Reeve. She wrote the letter to James Harper. Then she went to find Blackwell. He was at the hotel as Ruth had said. She found him in the dining room, which was the kind of place a man like Blackwell chose to be visible public central, where being seen was its own form of presence. He saw her come in. His expression did not change, but his posture did the specific micro-adjustment of a man who had not expected this, and was managing the not having expected it. She sat down across from him without being invited. He held his coffee. Clara, he said. You came here to use me, she said. Not to find me, not out of concern. To use the fact of me, a woman with a complicated history staying at a rancher's property, as a means to create leverage you could convert into business advantage. She held his gaze. I want you to know that I know that. He held his coffee. He said nothing. I also want you to know that Samuel Carter's position in this valley is not what it was this morning, she said. Ruth Mabry talked to people today. Hanson talked to people. In a community this size, those conversations reach everyone who matters within 24 hours. She held his gaze. The story you came here to plant is competing now with the true story, and the true story has the advantage of being true. Blackwell held his coffee. You can't prove anything, he said. I don't need to prove anything, she said. I told the truth. The truth has a quality to it that constructed stories don't. People who have been listening to people for long enough can feel the difference. She held his gaze. You know this. It's the thing that makes your approach work, the feeling that something is being withheld. I gave them the feeling that nothing was being withheld. He held his coffee. The calculation was running. She held his gaze. I wrote to James Harper today, she said. His letter will take weeks to arrive. By the time it does, you'll be gone. But when it arrives, it will confirm everything I said. His expression did not change. But his coffee cup, when he set it down, was placed with more deliberateness than before. The small tells. She had learned to read them. You should go home, Edward, she said. The thing you came here to do is not going to work. He looked at her. She held his gaze. She did not feel afraid. She felt the specific clarity of a woman who has named the thing that was threatening her, and found that naming it reduced it, not eliminated it, reduced it to its actual dimensions, which were considerable, but not infinite, and were crucially her problem to manage, rather than her burden to run from. She was not running. She had stopped running. This isn't over, he said. You said that yesterday, she said. She stood up. She went back to the ranch. Samuel came home an hour after her. He came in and found her at the table with the accounts she had been doing, them genuinely doing them, because she needed something concrete to do with her hands while she waited. He sat down. Reeve, he said. Yes, she said. Reeve told Blackwell this morning he wasn't interested in the feed contract discussion, Samuel said. He'd made up his mind before I got there. She held the ledger. Why? She said. Because Hanson talked to him last night, Samuel said. After Blackwell left the bar. She held the ledger. She thought about Hanson, who had been at the store when Blackwell was at the hotel bar, and who had apparently been as busy as Blackwell in his own quiet way. 8 years, she said. That's what 8 years in this valley looks like. Yes, Samuel said. Blackwell has been here 2 days, she said. Yes, Samuel said. She held the ledger. She held it for a moment longer than necessary. Then she put it down and looked at Samuel. He's going to leave, she said. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but he'll go. Yes, Samuel said. And when he goes, she said, it will be the first time since October of 1879 that I am not running from something he did. Samuel held her gaze. She held his. Something was happening in the space between them, the same thing that had been happening gradually for 5 weeks. And that had become something more specific in the cabin when he was carrying her in from the fence line and in the 7 days since, and in the way she had stood at the fire while Blackwell was in the room. She held his gaze. Samuel, she said. Yes, he said. I said I needed time, she said. Before I could name something. He held her gaze. I remember, he said. I'm not saying I have all the time I need, she said. I don't think the time is finished. She held his gaze. But I know something I didn't know 5 weeks ago. About what this is. He held her gaze. What is it? He said. She looked at the ledger on the table. At the fire. At the room that had been Margaret Carter's room, and that had become in 5 weeks the room where she was no longer running. She looked at Samuel. It's real, she said. Whatever else it is or becomes, it's real. And I have not had something real in 2 years. She held his gaze. I wanted you to know that I know that. He held her gaze. He held his hands on the table. He said, I know what it cost you to say that. Yes, she said. And I know it's not everything, he said. Not yet. Not yet, she said. But it's real, he said. It's real, she said. He held her gaze. He reached across the table. He put his hand over hers. She held his hand. They sat at the kitchen table in the cabin on Carter Ranch in Wyoming Territory in 1881. And Blackwell was at the hotel in Silver Ridge, and James Harper was somewhere in Vermont, and 2 years of running were behind her, and she did not know yet exactly what was in front of her. But she knew the difference between managed kindness and real kindness. She knew the difference between a constructed version and the true one. She knew the difference between surviving and being somewhere. She was somewhere. She held his hand. That was enough for tonight. It was more than enough. It was for the first time in 2 years, everything. It was more than enough. It was for the first time in 2 years, everything and everything turned out to be something she had to learn how to hold without dropping it. Because she had been holding the minimum for so long, that the weight of more was its own kind of adjustment. Blackwell left Silver Ridge on a Thursday. She knew because Walt came in from the morning rounds and said, "Hotel's down 1 guest." And that was the entirety of the report, which was exactly the right amount of information delivered in exactly the right amount of words, and she held her coffee and said, "Thank you, Walt." And that was the entirety of that. Samuel across the table held his coffee. She held hers. Neither of them said anything about what it meant. They didn't need to. The leaving was not the end of the thing. She had understood that well enough to not mistake it for the end. Blackwell would recalibrate. He would find another angle, another city, another version of the approach that had worked for him in Greer Hollow. He would not stop being the person he was because this particular move had failed. But he was gone from Silver Ridge, and that meant the ground Clara was standing on had changed. Not from something to nothing, from precarious to stable. The difference between standing on ice and standing on earth. The earth might have problems of its own, but it did not threaten to give way every time she shifted her weight. She held her coffee. "Samuel," she said. "Yes," he said. "I need to do something today," she said. "Something that isn't the ranch." He looked at her. "What?" he said. "I need to go into Silver Ridge," she said. "By myself." He held his coffee. She could see him working through what to say. "Not because I can't go with you," he started. "I know that," she said. "I want to go alone because what I need to do needs to be done alone. Not because it's dangerous, because it's mine." He held his coffee. He understood. "All right," he said. She rode into Silver Ridge. She went to Ruth Mabry first. Ruth was at her house, not the general store. Her house, which was the house of a woman who had built a full life in a difficult place and had arranged it to reflect that fullness. Ruth was in her kitchen when Clara arrived, and she looked at Clara's face and said, "He's gone." "Yes," Clara said. Ruth poured tea without asking. Clara sat at the table. "I came to thank you," Clara said. "I didn't do it for thanks," Ruth said. "I know," Clara said. "I'm giving it anyway." Ruth sat across from her. She held her own tea. "I talked to 6 people yesterday," Ruth said. "All of them said the same thing, that Blackwell felt like a man with something to manage, that your story felt like a woman telling the truth." She held her tea. "People know the difference. They don't always act on it, but they know." "In Greer Hollow they didn't act on it," Clara said. "Greer Hollow had Blackwell for years before you became a problem for him," Ruth said. "He had the territory mapped. He knew who would believe what and who could be persuaded of what." She held her tea. "He came to Silver Ridge for 2 days. That's not enough time to map territory." "He thought it would be," Clara said. "Most people who are very good at something become overconfident about it," Ruth said. "It's usually what stops them eventually." Clara held her tea. She thought about 2 years, about a man who was very good at something and who had been applying it consistently enough that the application had started to feel inevitable. "I didn't know it could be stopped," Clara said. "I thought running was the only option because I thought the option of standing still would just give him more time to build the story." "Sometimes that's true," Ruth said, "in a place where he's already built the foundation." She held her tea. "It's not true in a new place. In a new place you can get there first." Clara held her tea. She thought about what Samuel had said the night of the letter. Leaving is what he's counting on. She had known intellectually that the running was not a solution. She had not known until that night that the alternative was possible. "Samuel told me to stay," she said. Ruth held her tea. "Smart man," she said. Clara held her tea. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I want to ask you something." "Ask," Ruth said. "You don't know me," Clara said. "You had my account of events and his, and you made a decision about which one was true." She held her tea. "What made you decide?" Ruth held her tea. She was quiet for a moment. "You told it the way people tell something that happened to them," she said. "With the specific details that are too small to invent and too painful to include if you were managing a story. The woman at the boarding house in Laramie who sold your location. The 4 months you stayed in Greer Hollow after the fire. The one letter from James Harper." She held her tea. "Those are not the details of a person constructing a narrative. Those are the details of a person who was there." Clara held her tea. She thought about the details. She had not decided to include them. They had simply come out the specific pieces of the story that were attached to the memory in a way that meant you couldn't tell the memory without them. "Blackwell's version," she said. "Did it have details?" "His version was smooth," Ruth said. "Everything in it served the story. Nothing was inconvenient." She held her tea. Real things are inconvenient sometimes. Real people include the parts that make them look bad as well as the parts that don't. Clara held her tea. She thought about the parts that made her look bad. The months in Greer Hollow, where she had tried to manage her reputation instead of confronting what was happening. The leaving that had looked like guilt to people who wanted it to look like guilt. The way she had been moving for 2 years and had arrived at Samuel's fence line with nothing and had still in the first breath of consciousness tried to get up. You included those, Ruth said, watching her face. The things that didn't make you look entirely sympathetic. That was what convinced me. Clara held her tea. She nodded once. She finished her tea. She thanked Ruth. She left. She rode to Hanson's store. Hanson looked at her when she came in. He's gone, Hanson said. Yes, Clara said. Figured, Hanson said. She stood at the counter. I wanted to thank you, she said. You already did that yesterday, he said. I know, she said. I'm doing it again. He held his counter. Clara, he said. Yes, she said. He looked at her directly, the direct assessing look of a man who ran a business that required understanding people quickly and had gotten good at it. Carter's a solid man, he said. Has been here 8 years. Lost his family. Didn't let it make him small. He held the counter. Whatever's happening at his ranch, I'm not asking about it, seems to be something that's good for him. She held his gaze. It's good for me too, she said. He nodded once. She went back to the ranch. The twist came on a Saturday. Not from Blackwell, she had not expected it to come from Blackwell. He was gone, and she had some confidence that he was gone in the way of a man who had assessed the territory and found it unfavorable. He would find other territory. The twist came from a letter. Not the one she had written to James Harper, that was far too soon. She had sent it less than 2 weeks ago, and Vermont was a long way. This was a different letter entirely. A letter that arrived with the post, and that Samuel brought in, and that he looked at before he handed it to her, with the specific expression of someone who doesn't yet know what something contains but can tell from its outside that it is significant. The return address was Greer Hollow, New Hampshire, not from James Harper, from someone she had not heard from in 2.5 years. Mary Harper, James's sister, the woman that Edward Blackwell had wanted to connect himself to before he had decided that destroying Clara was more useful than pursuing Mary. She held the letter for a long moment. She opened it. Mary's handwriting was the same as it had always been, precise, with the particular attention to letter forms of someone who had been taught well and had cared about the teaching. She had written 3 pages. Clara read all 3. Mary had seen Blackwell before he left for Wyoming. She had not known when she saw him what he was going to do there. She had not known he was going to Clara. But Blackwell had made a mistake. Not a large mistake. Not one that was obvious in the moment. He had asked Mary in the days before he left about the Harper fire. He had asked with the specific casualness of a man reviewing a story he needed to be confident in before he repeated it. He had asked Mary what she remembered about where Clara had been the night the fire started. Mary had told him. And then, 2 days later, Blackwell had left for Wyoming, and Mary had thought about why he had asked that question, and Mary had remembered something she had not thought about in 2 years, because the fire and everything after it had been a thing she had put away in the specific mental way of a trauma you survive by not examining. She had remembered that Clara had been in the front room of the Harper house, not the kitchen, when the fire started. She had remembered because she had been with Clara in the front room. They had been talking. Their mother and James had been in the kitchen. The fire had started in the kitchen. Clara had not been in the kitchen. Mary had told people this in the days after the fire. But by the time she had told people, Blackwell's version of events was already established, and people had nodded at what Mary said while continuing to hold Blackwell's version, because that was what people did when a story was too convenient for too many people to give up. Mary had thought in the 2 years since that she had done what she could, but Blackwell's question before Wyoming had made her understand something. He was still using the story. He was using it somewhere else, on someone else. And the question about where Clara had been in the house told her that the detail of her being in the front room, not the kitchen, was a detail he was trying to make sure Mary wouldn't contradict. She had written to Clara because she was done being the person who had done what she could. The letter ended. "I am sorry I didn't come to you sooner. I am sorry I stayed quiet after I should have spoken. I don't know if it helps now, but James and I are writing to anyone in Greer Hollow who will listen. Edward Blackwell's story about you is false. We know it is false. We should have said so more loudly years ago. I am saying it now." Clara put the letter down. She sat very still. Samuel was at the table across from her. He held his coffee. He had not read the letter. He was watching her face. "Tell me," he said. She told him. He listened to all of it. When she finished, he held his coffee. "Mary Harper is writing to people in Greer Hollow," he said. "Yes," Clara said. "Which means the story Blackwell has been maintaining for 2 years is being challenged from inside," she said. "By someone who was there, who was in the room." She held the letter. "I couldn't challenge it myself from inside because I left. Mary can." She held the letter. She was doing something she had not expected to be doing. She was crying. Not the performance of crying. Not the crying she had refused to do in Greer Hollow, because crying looked like guilt. Not the crying she had refused to do on the trail, because crying required resources she was spending on other things. The actual kind. The kind that came out of the specific relief of understanding that something you had believed was permanent was not permanent. That a story about you that had followed you for 2.5 years was going to be challenged by the person who had the most specific knowledge to challenge it. She let it come. Samuel did not move toward her. He did not say anything. He did what he did. He was present fully without requirement or performance, or the specific discomfort of someone who didn't know what to do with other people's pain. After a while, she stopped. She held the letter. "I didn't know she was watching," Clara said. "Mary, I didn't know she saw where I was when the fire started. She was talking to me. I didn't think anyone was tracking the details of who was where." "Blackwell was," Samuel said. "Yes?" Clara said. He was checking to make sure his version was solid. And in checking, he reminded Mary of what she knew. She held the letter. She thought about a man who was very good at something and who had become overconfident about it, which was what Ruth had said usually stopped people eventually. "He stopped himself," she said. "Yes," Samuel said. She held the letter. "Samuel," she said. "Yes," he said. "When you found me at the fence line," she said. "What did you think?" He held his coffee. "I thought you were someone who had been in something too long to see a way out of," he said, "from the specific way you were still trying to get up." "And," she said. "And I thought," he stopped, held his coffee. "I thought I know what that looks like, from the inside." She held his gaze. "After Margaret died," he said, "I was still trying to get up for 2 years. The ranch, the accounts, the cattle, all of it I was trying to get up because that was the only thing I understood how to do." He held his coffee. Someone who is still trying to get up is someone who hasn't stopped believing there's somewhere to get up to. She held his gaze. "I hadn't," she said. "I know," he said. "Even when I thought I had," she said. "Even when I told myself I was just moving away, rather than toward anything. Some part of me was still—" She stopped. "Still trying to get up." "Yes," he said. She held the letter. "You carried me in," she said. "You would have gotten there," he said. "Maybe," she said. "But I got here. And here is—" She stopped. "Here is what I was trying to get up toward, without knowing it." He held his coffee. He held her gaze. "Clara," he said. "Yes," he said. "I want to say something," he said. "And I want to say it directly because that's the only way I know how to say things that matter." "Say it," she said. He held his coffee. He set it down. He held her gaze across the kitchen table. "I love you," he said. Simple. the way he said all true things. She held his gaze. She held the letter. She thought about the fence line and the storm, about the ankle and the accounts and the coffee, about Margaret, who had understood something essential, and about what it meant to honor that understanding. About Blackwell's letter and the night they had decided to fight it. About Silver Ridge and Ruth Mabry and Hanson, and the truth that had a quality to it that constructed stories didn't. About Mary Harper writing letters in New Hampshire because she had finally done what she should have done years ago. About a woman who had been trying to get up for 2 years and had gotten up and had gotten here. "I know," she said. He held her gaze. "I know," she said again. "I have known for a while. I've been being careful about it." She held his gaze. "I said I needed time to name it. I don't think I need more time." He held very still. "I love you," she said. "And I want you to know what I mean when I say it. I mean the man who carried me in from the fence line without asking who I was, who made coffee and gave me accounts and said things that were true instead of things that were comfortable, who told me about Margaret as a way of telling me who he was." She held his gaze. "I mean all of it. The specific, real entirety of who you are. That's what I love." He held her gaze. Something moved through his expression. Not the flat, controlled expression, not the managed expression, the full, open version of himself that she had seen in fragments across the weeks, and that she was seeing completely now. He reached across the table. He put his hand over hers. She held his hand. The letter from Mary Harper was between them on the table. The fire was on. The accounts were on the shelf, current and organized. Outside, the Wyoming winter was doing what it did, enormous and honest and indifferent, which was why she had said it was beautiful, because there was something to love about a place that told you the truth up front. Walt came in from the evening rounds. He stopped. He looked at the two of them at the table. He looked at their hands. He went to get his coffee. He sat at the other end of the table. He held his coffee. He did not say anything. After a while he said, "Cattle are fine." "Good," Samuel said. Walt held his coffee. He looked at Clara. "You staying?" he said. She held Samuel's hand. She looked at Walt. "Yes," she said. "I'm staying." Walt nodded once. He drank his coffee. He went to his chair by the fire. The evening went on the way. Evenings went with supper, and the banked fire, and the lamp, and the specific ordinary texture of people who lived together in a place that was home, which was the rarest and most necessary thing, and which Clara Whitmore had stopped believing she would find, and had found anyway. In the weeks that followed, James Harper's letter arrived. It said what Mary's had said with James's voice instead of Mary's, the voice of a man who had made a choice he was not proud of and was doing what he could now that he understood the full picture. He was writing to people in Greer Hollow. He was willing to provide a written account to anyone who needed it. Clara wrote back. She thanked him. She told him she had stopped running. She told him she was in Wyoming. She told him she was well. She was. The spring came to Carter Ranch the way spring came to Wyoming. Not gently, but certainly the specific particular arrival of warmth after cold that you did not take for granted in a country that had been honest with you about what cold looked like. She planted things, not because Samuel's ranch lacked a garden. It had one started years ago. By Margaret, maintained in the years since by necessity rather than care. She planted things because she wanted to, because she wanted her hands in the earth of a place she intended to stay in, and she wanted to watch things come up from it. She told Samuel this while she was doing it. He watched her for a moment. He said, "Margaret grew sage here, along the east wall." "I know," she said. "I can see where it was." She held the soil. "Can I plant it again?" He held her gaze. "Yes," he said. "Plant it." She planted sage along the east wall. The accounts were in the best shape they had been in since Margaret had managed them. 3 suppliers had been confronted with discrepancies, and 2 had corrected their practices, and 1 had been replaced entirely with a supplier from the next valley who was honest in the specific way of people who understood that their reputation was their business. Walt had taught her to ride properly, not the functional riding she had been doing, but the Wyoming kind, the kind that was necessary when the territory required you to cover real distance in real conditions. She was good at it faster than Walt expected, which she could tell from the way he didn't say so. The summer brought more work than any season she had experienced. She did all of it, not because she had to. Samuel never asked more of her than she offered. She did it because doing it was the thing she had been looking for in all the moving. The work that meant something because you were doing it for something real. On an evening in August, she and Samuel were sitting where she had sat with him in April, outside in the late afternoon, watching the light go across the Wyoming hills. "Do you ever regret finding me?" she said. He held her hand. He had been holding her hand since the night of Mary's letter, in the specific, quiet, ongoing way of someone for whom holding someone's hand had become as natural as breathing. "No," he said. "Why not?" she said. He was quiet for a moment. "Because the day I found you," he said, "wasn't the day I rescued you." She held his hand. "It was the day I found my own reason to live again," he said. She held his hand. She held that. She thought about the fence line, about the specific moment when she had understood her body was not going to carry her further, about the specific moment of letting herself be carried by someone who hadn't asked anything. She had been trying to get up. He had been the somewhere to get up toward. Neither of them had known it yet. They knew it now. The pain she had carried for 2.5 years. The fire, the story, the moving, the 4 months of heading away from everything she had known did not disappear. Pain like that was not built to disappear. It was built to be carried. The question was always how you carried it and who you carried it beside. She carried it differently now. She carried it as the thing that had brought her to a fence line in Wyoming in November. As the thing that had produced a woman who could look at accounts and find what didn't fit, and could hold her ground in a room where someone was trying to define her, and could tell the truth in a way that had the quality that true things had. She carried it as the road she had walked to get here. She was not grateful for the pain, but she was clear about what the pain had required of her, and what it had produced, and where it had brought her, and who was sitting beside her with her hand in his while the August light went across the Wyoming hills. The scars remained. They always would. But they were hers. They were the map of the road she had traveled. And the road had led here, to a ranch in Wyoming, where the accounts were in order, and the sage was growing along the east wall, and Walt was in the bunkhouse, saying as little as was necessary, and Samuel Carter was holding her hand while the evening became itself. Clara Whitmore had collapsed at a fence line, believing she was too damaged for anything. What she had found in the specific, honest, difficult, beautiful country of Silver Ridge Valley was this: the damage was real, and the woman who had survived it was real, and the life she was building out of both was more real